My name is Anya, and this is the story of how I stopped being a guest in my own life. It's a story about my own family, about being deliberately excluded and erased by the very people who were supposed to be my biggest supporters. It's about a private jet, a web of lies, and the day I decided that instead of getting angry, I would get organized. Instead of crying, I chose to collect receipts, and I let the truth have its moment in the spotlight, right on the tarmac. And as I tell you this, I want to speak directly to anyone watching who feels like I did. To anyone who has ever been sidelined, talked over, or made to feel small in rooms that you helped build. To the quiet one whose ideas are stolen in meetings, the family scapegoat who carries the blame, the one who gives and gives, only to be left out of the celebration. I know that lonely, painful place. It makes you question your reality, your value, even your own memories. I want you to hear me clearly. Your worth is not determined by their inability to see it. This story is for you. It's not about revenge, it's about reclamation. It's about the journey from silent hurt to quiet power. And my deepest hope is that by the time my story is over, you'll feel a spark of that power ignite in you too. It's the strength to stop fighting for a seat at their table and finally find the courage to build your own. It began, as the most profound endings often do, with a quiet moment in my own kitchen. The late afternoon sun, the color of weak tea, was streaming through the window, illuminating the faint scratches on the stainless steel countertop. I had chosen that specific slab of steel 3 years ago, admiring its cold, uncompromising honesty. Now, I found myself staring at its surface, tracing the faint lines with my eyes, trying to tether myself to something solid as the ground beneath me turned to sand. My husband, David, was a silhouette against the doorframe, a posture of feigned casualness that I had come to recognize as a harbinger of discomfort. His discomfort, which he would soon attempt to make mine. He was scrolling on his phone, the rhythmic flick of his thumb the only sound in the room. "So, Zara's excited about the trip," he said. The words were lobbed into the silence, a test balloon. He didn't look at me, a classic tell. When David couldn't meet my eyes, it meant he was already rehearsing his retreat. My hands were perfectly steady as I opened the refrigerator, the cool air washing over my face. I took out a bottle of water, the condensation instantly beating in the warm kitchen. "Oh?" I said, my voice a placid lake I was determined to keep from rippling. "Yeah," he continued, his focus still locked on the bright little screen. "She just posted a picture of the kids with their little travel pillows, you know? The ones that look like monkeys, it's cute." He paused. #family getaway. I unscrewed the cap of the water bottle. The small, sharp crack of the plastic seal felt disproportionately violent. The concept of the 1,000 cuts is often metaphorical, but for me, it was a literal accounting. I could feel the phantom sting of each one. I remembered Zara's 35th birthday party, a lavish affair held at a restaurant I secretly paid the deposit for after her credit card was declined. During her toast, she had thanked all the little people who made her life so wonderful, her eyes sweeping right past me as if I were part of the waitstaff. David had squeezed my hand under the table, a silent plea to absorb the blow without complaint. Then there was the family history book. A weighty, leather-bound tome Zara had commissioned to celebrate her parents-in-law's 50th anniversary. She had presented it as her own laborious project, a gift of love. It was my research assistant who had spent 6 weeks in dusty archives, and my account that had paid the historian's exorbitant fees. When I finally held the book, its pages smelling of expensive ink and glue, I'd flipped to the acknowledgments. She had thanked her dog walker, her yoga instructor, and the barista who always remembered her oat milk latte. My name was nowhere to be found. When I'd pointed it out gently, Zara had laughed her tinkling, dismissive laugh. "Oh, Anya, don't be so transactional. You're family. It goes without saying." For years, I had accepted these narratives. I had allowed my contributions to be edited out of my own life story. I told myself it was the price of peace, the tax for being the successful, unmarried, and later childless sister. My success made her insecure, so I learned to shrink it. David, my loving, conflict-averse husband, was the chief architect of this self-diminishment. "You know how she is," was his constant refrain, a phrase that simultaneously absolved Zara of all malice and shackled me with the responsibility of managing her ego. What I didn't understand then was that he wasn't protecting me from her. He was protecting himself from the fallout of a confrontation he lacked the spine to initiate. I took a long, slow sip of water and finally turned to face him. My face was a carefully constructed mask of neutrality. "That's nice," I said. "Where are they going?" He shifted his weight. The silhouette flickered. "Oh, you know, the usual spot, the villa. Just a quick weekend thing to get away before school starts." "The usual spot," I repeated. The words were metallic in my mouth. The villa was part of a portfolio I'd acquired 2 years after my first company went public. My sister and her family were its most frequent, non-paying guests. The quick weekend thing was, I knew, taking place on the Gulfstream G650 I had purchased through my holding company, Phoenix Air. The company name had been my private joke, a nod to rising from the ashes of my parents' messy, debt-ridden estate. A jet my sister treated like her personal limousine, right down to complaining about the brand of champagne stocked in the galley. I walked toward him, my steps measured and silent on the cool tile. I held out my hand. "Let me see the monkey pillows." He flinched. It was a small, barely perceptible tightening in his shoulders, but I saw it. He hesitated for a heartbeat too long before placing the phone in my palm. His screen was still lit up with the Instagram post. My niece and nephew were beaming, their faces pure, unadulterated joy. In their hands, they held up custom-printed tickets, designed to look like something out of Willy Wonka, with the words, "Thorne Family Getaway," in an elegant script. And there, in the corner of the photograph, peeking out from Zara's handbag on the seat next to them, was a familiar sight. A luggage tag of dark Cordovan leather embossed with a stylized silver bird in flight. The Phoenix Air logo, my logo. Beneath the picture, the caption read, "And we're off. The babies are so excited for the trip Mommy planned. Time for a little sun and sand." Family first. Blessed. The first comment was from Marcus, her husband. "The only way to fly, thanks to my amazing wife for arranging everything. You think of it all?" A strange and terrible calm washed over me. It wasn't the hot flush of anger or the cold dread of shock. It was something far worse. The quiet, chilling finality of a truth fully realized. My pulse didn't race. It seemed to slow, each beat a heavy drum marking the end of an era. The era of me being a fool. I handed the phone back to David, my movements economical. "I wasn't invited," I said. It was not a question. His eyes, those beautiful brown eyes I had loved for 15 years, darted around the room. They looked at the refrigerator, the window, the floor, anywhere but at me. "Anya, come on. I'm sure it's just a massive miscommunication. You know how chaotic it gets with them. Zara probably just assumed I told you or that the invitation was a given." "Did you assume it was a given?" I asked, my voice dangerously soft. "Did you know about this trip, David?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. He ran a hand through his hair. "We might have mentioned it last week, but it was all very vague. I didn't know the details were finalized." "You didn't know," I repeated, letting the lie hang in the air between us. "So, when Zara posted a picture with packed bags and flight tickets, you were as surprised as I am right now?" The silence that followed was his confession. It was not empty. It was dense with years of his complicity, his quiet negotiations, his choice to trade my dignity for his own comfort. In that silence, I understood that I was completely and utterly alone in this marriage, in this family. And the realization didn't break me. It liberated me. I nodded once, a slow, final acknowledgement. The emotional dam I had spent a lifetime reinforcing hadn't just broken, it had dematerialized. And what lay in its place was not a raging flood of tears, but a vast, cold, perfectly still reservoir of resolve. This was not about a missed vacation. It never was. It was about a hostile takeover of my life, executed with 1,000,000 smiles and 1,000 paper cuts. Without another word, I turned and walked toward my home office. I didn't slam the door. I closed it with a soft, definitive click. The sound echoed the snapping shut of a book I had read one too many times. I sat in the high-backed leather chair behind my expansive desk, the one piece of furniture David had called unnecessarily intimidating. I powered on my computer. Instead of opening a document, I created a new, encrypted folder. I named it Audit. I stared at the word for a long moment, the cursor blinking patiently. A single, crystalline thought formed in my mind, as sharp and clear as a shard of ice. Watch. Don't react yet. Let them think I'm broken. The next 48 hours were an exercise in controlled fury. The pain was still present, a low-frequency hum beneath my ribs, but it had transmuted from a debilitating ache into a high-octane fuel. I moved with a chilling sense of purpose, my grief channeled into a singular, methodical task. The question that echoed in the silent rooms of my house was no longer, "Why are they doing this to me?" That was a victim's question. The new question was far more powerful. How, precisely, did I allow this to happen? My office, once a sanctuary for creative thought and business strategy, became a forensics lab. I was not seeking vengeance. I was preparing for a reckoning. I was building a case not for a jury, but for myself. A meticulous reconstruction of the truth, brick by undeniable brick. It began with the foundation, the legal and financial architecture of my life, which they had treated as a community garden. I accessed my digital vault, the process a familiar dance of passwords and biometric scans. Folder, Phoenix Air. Subfolder, Incorporation. I opened the file Phoenix Air Incorporation Final Executed.pdf. The screen glowed with the stark, black and white finality of a legal document. I scrolled to the signatory page. Anya Volkov, 70% majority shareholder. The remaining 30% was held by a blind trust I had established for my key employees. The names Zara Thorne and Marcus Thorne were nowhere to be found. I saved a copy to the audit folder. Receipt number 1. Next, the money trail. Folder, Phoenix Air. Subfolder, Asset Acquisition. File, G650, Wire, Confirmation, T1 PDF. There it was. A wire transfer for an 8-figure sum sent directly from my personal investment portfolio at Morgan Stanley to the Gulfstream Aerospace Corporation. The timestamp was from 2 years, 1 month, and 6 days ago. I remembered that day. I'd been so proud. I'd called Zara to share the news, and she'd squealed with delight, "Oh my God, we got a jet." Even then, her use of "we" was a subtle colonization of my achievement. I had let it pass. I screenshotted the transaction details. Receipt number 2. The third layer was correspondence. My email archive was a digital archaeological dig. I searched for jet acquisition, and over 1,000 emails populated the screen. I was a ghost haunting my own past. Here was an email from the design firm, dated a month after the purchase. Anya, attaching the latest renderings for the cabin interior. We love your idea of using reclaimed teak instead of the standard walnut veneer. It's a bold choice. My choice. I remembered Marcus arguing for walnut, calling it more classic. I had held firm. Here was another, from Captain Eva Rostova, a formidable woman who was one of the most respected pilots in private aviation. It was her response to my official job offer. Dear Ms. Volkov, I am honored to accept the position of chief pilot for Phoenix Air. It is rare to find an owner who is so deeply and intelligently involved in the operational integrity of their flight department. I look forward to working with you. Working with me, not my family, not my brother-in-law. I saved the entire email thread, with its headers and timestamps, as a PDF. Receipt number 3. While I toiled in the quiet hum of my server, Zara's public performance reached its zenith. Her Instagram was a fire hose of curated joy. She posted an Instagram story video, panning across a collection of new resort wear laid out on her bed. "Getting the family packed and ready for our little getaway," she chirped to her phone. "It's so much work, but it's worth it to create these memories." Later, a boomerang of her and Marcus clinking champagne glasses captioned, "He treats me like a queen. Your husband goals." Each post was a new lie, a fresh layer of paint over the truth I was systematically uncovering. She believed she had won. Her hubris was my greatest ally. The most painful part of the dig was exhuming the text messages with David. It was a timeline of my own capitulation. 2 years ago. Him. Zara just introduced Marcus to her friend as the brains behind Phoenix Air. I can't believe her. Me. It's fine. It's not worth the fight. Let him have it. Last Christmas. Him. Are you sure you want to let them use the plane to fly to Aspen? They left it a mess last time. Me. It's for the kids, David. I want my niece and nephew to see the snow. Please don't make it a thing. 6 months ago? Him. Marcus is complaining about the catering service again. Says the sushi wasn't fresh enough. Me. Find out what he wants. I'll call the FBO and have it changed. Reading the texts, I felt a hot flush of shame, but it was directed entirely at my past self. I saw a woman so terrified of being labeled the difficult, rich sister that she had willingly subsidized her own erasure. She had paid for every ticket, every meal, every vacation, and had done so with a forced smile, accepting a pat on the head as her only thanks. That woman died in the kitchen 2 days ago. The final piece of evidence, the one that would elevate my case from a personal grievance to an undeniable indictment, required a direct action. I couldn't rely on my archives. I needed a current, irrefutable fact. My first instinct was to call Captain Rostova directly, but I opted for a more subtle approach. I called the main desk at the FBO, the private terminal they would be using. "Good morning," I said, my voice calm and pleasant. "This is Anya Volkov calling. I'm just doing a quick confirmation for the Thorn party's flight to St. Bart's tomorrow morning. I seem to have misplaced the final passenger count." The receptionist was polite and efficient. "Of course, Ms. Volkov. Let me see. I have the flight plan right here. Phoenix Air Flight 7 Alpha Victor departing at 0900. I have them down for 6 passengers." The number hit me with the force of a physical blow. 6. Zara, Marcus, their 2 children. That was 4. A cold certainty clicked into place in my mind. "Thank you," I said, my voice unwavering. "That's all I needed." I hung up the phone. Now, for the smoking gun. I composed a brief, formal email. To Eva Rostova, from Anya Volkov. Subject, Manifest for Flight, 7AV, 18 June. "Good morning, Captain. Could you please forward me the final itemized passenger manifest for tomorrow's 9 a.m. flight to St. Bart's for my records? Thank you, Anya." The reply was in my inbox in under 5 minutes. The attachment was a single PDF file, PA 7AV Manifest, 18 Jun, Trimmy5.pdf. I clicked it open. The screen glowed. Thorn, Zara Thorn, Marcus Thorn, Olivia Thorn, Leo Henderson, Robert Henderson, Carol. My name was not on the list. It wasn't an oversight, it was a replacement. They had given my seats on my plane to their friends. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking softly. The feeling in my chest was not anger. It was something colder, purer. It was the absolute stillness of certainty. The hurt had finally burned away completely, leaving behind a diamond-hard resolve. They had not simply excluded me. They had declared me irrelevant. They had made a grave miscalculation. I looked at the folder on my screen named Audit, now populated with a dozen meticulously labeled files. It was never about the vacation. It was about the narrative. And I was now fully prepared to correct the record. The 60-minute drive to the private airfield was the calmest I had felt in years. I wasn't rehearsing lines or strategizing attacks. My strategy was already in place, its components locked and loaded. My only weapon was the truth, and my only goal was its quiet, public deployment. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. the kind of day my sister would describe on Instagram as an absolute dream. The FBO terminal at Westchester County Airport is a temple of understated luxury. Valets glide silently, the air smells of money and fresh espresso, and the ambient noise is a low, respectful hum. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see them, the Thorne-Henderson party. They had commandeered the most prominent seating area, a crescent of plush white sofas. Zara, in a flowing silk caftan, was holding court, gesturing expansively with a champagne flute. Marcus was leaning back, one arm slung over the back of the sofa, the very picture of a man who believes he is the king of the castle. Their friends, the Hendersons, were laughing, caught in the orbit of Zara's performative charm. And David? My husband was standing slightly apart from the group, staring out at the tarmac, a faint, anxious line etched between his brows. He looked like a man waiting for a storm he knew he couldn't stop. He saw my car first, a black Escalade, the one I typically used for business. I saw his posture change, a subtle straightening of the spine, a flicker of panic in his eyes. He didn't wave. He didn't move. He just watched as the valet opened my door. My entrance altered the physics of the room. The low hum of conversation faltered. I had not dressed for a tropical getaway. I wore a bespoke suit of charcoal gray wool, a silk shell underneath, and a pair of Prada heels that made a firm, deliberate click-clack on the polished marble floor. I carried a slim leather portfolio and nothing else. My hair was pulled back in a severe chignon. I was not Anya, the forgotten sister. I was Ms. Volkov, the owner. Zara's laughter died in her throat. A flash of pure, undiluted annoyance crossed her features before she could conceal it behind her go-to mask of saccharine sweetness. She rose, gliding toward me. "Anya? Good heavens, what a surprise!" she chirped, leaning in for an air kiss that I sidestepped by shifting my portfolio from one hand to the other. "Did you come all this way just to see us off? That is just the sweetest thing." "I had business at the airport," I said, my voice cool and even. Marcus sauntered over, draping an arm around Zara's shoulders, his grin a condescending smirk. "Thinking of buying one of these yourself, Anya?" he asked, gesturing vaguely toward the jets parked outside. "I can give you the name of our broker if you want. He's top-notch. Takes care of everything for us." I met his gaze and held it. I didn't reply. I simply let his lie, so breathtaking in its audacity, hang in the air between us. I watched the confidence in his eyes curdle into confusion at my silence. This was the moment. As if on cue, the double doors from the tarmac slid open. Captain Eva Rostova entered, followed by her first officer. She was the picture of competence, her uniform immaculate, her silver hair coiled in a tight bun that mirrored my own. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, scanned the lounge. They passed over the Hendersons, over Marcus, over Zara. They landed on me. A flicker of recognition, a small, respectful smile. She changed her trajectory, bypassing the laughing group on the sofa, and walked directly toward me. Her first officer followed a pace behind. "Ms. Volkov, good morning," Captain Rostova said. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the room, clear as a bell. The remaining whispers in the lounge ceased. Everyone was watching. "We are prepared for departure. All pre-flight checks are complete. We're just waiting on your final authorization." Zara, seeing her authority so publicly and inexplicably bypassed, took a step forward. "Excuse me, Captain?" she said, her voice strained with forced brightness. "I think there's been a mistake. We're the passengers, the Thorne party." Captain Rostova gave her a polite, cursory glance, the kind one gives to a piece of furniture that is in the way, before turning her full attention back to me. "Ma'am?" she prompted, ignoring Zara completely. This was the checkmate. The public deference of the crew was more damning than any document I could have produced. I saw the color drain from Zara's face, her perfect hostess smile collapsing into a slack-jawed mask of horror. Marcus's smug expression had vanished, replaced by a pale, sickly confusion. He looked from the captain to me and back again, the gears of his mind grinding, failing to comprehend this new reality that had just crashed his party. The Hendersons were staring at their shoes, their faces burning with second-hand humiliation, suddenly realizing they were not guests of honor, but props in a family drama they wanted no part of. I gave the captain a small nod. "Thank you, Captain. There appears to be a slight discrepancy with the passenger manifest that I need to correct." I took a deliberate step toward my sister. I kept my voice low, but in the tomb-like silence of the lounge, every word was a hammer blow. "You never asked, Zara," I said. "For this trip, or for any of the last dozen trips. You just assumed. You sent your request to my assistant, who booked it on my account for my plane. And I let you." I turned my gaze to Marcus. "And you? The broker you recommended to me? He works for a firm I have on retainer. They manage the maintenance schedules and crew rotations. They work for me." I let that sink in. I opened the leather portfolio. I wasn't going to show them documents. That would have been a plea. I was past pleading. Instead, I pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was the manifest. "According to this," I continued, my voice devoid of emotion, "you were so confident in my perpetual silence that you gave away 2 of my seats to your friends." I glanced at the Hendersons, who looked as if they wished the floor would swallow them whole. "I'm sure you're lovely people," I said to them kindly. "And since you came all this way, the seats are yours. My treat." Finally, I looked at Zara, my sister, who now looked small and exposed. "There has been a misunderstanding," I said, echoing David's weak excuse from my kitchen. "A misunderstanding about who owns this plane, and therefore, a misunderstanding about who gets to decide who flies on it." I folded the paper and slipped it back into my portfolio. "You and Marcus have made other arrangements." I turned my back on the shattered tableau of their vacation. I looked across the room at David, who stood frozen, his face a battlefield of shame and awe. I asked him one question, my voice softer now, but carrying all the weight of our shared future. "David, are you coming?" For a long moment, he didn't move. He looked at my face, then at his sister-in-law's crumbling facade, and he made a choice. He walked, his steps slow but resolute, across the marble floor, away from them, and came to stand by my side. Together, we walked out of the silent lounge, through the sliding glass doors and into the bright, brilliant sunshine of the tarmac, leaving the wreckage of their lies behind us. The interior of the G650 is designed for serenity, a cocoon of cream leather and polished teak suspended at 40,000 feet. But as we ascended into the vast, indifferent blue, the silence inside the cabin was anything but peaceful. It was a heavy, weighted silence, thick with unspoken words and the raw, exposed nerves of a relationship that had just been stress-tested to its breaking point. I deliberately took the owner's suite, a pair of wide, reclining chairs at the front of the main cabin that could be closed off with a sliding door. It was my seat. I had never sat in it before. On the few occasions I had flown with my family, I had always taken one of the smaller seats in the back, leaving the place of honor for Zara and Marcus. The simple act of sitting there felt like a quiet revolution. David took the chair opposite me, sinking into it as if his bones had turned to lead. He didn't speak. He just stared out the small oval window at the receding landscape, though I doubt he saw any of it. He was a man adrift in the wreckage of his own making. The Hendersons had sequestered themselves in the rear of the plane, their mortification a palpable presence even from 50 feet away. A flight attendant, a kind woman I had personally interviewed, approached and asked if I needed anything. "Just a black coffee, please, Maria," I said. My voice was steady. Maria nodded and retreated, her professionalism a small, comforting island of normalcy in the sea of emotional chaos. For nearly an hour, David remained silent. I didn't push him. I sipped my coffee and read through a business proposal on my tablet, my focus absolute. I was demonstrating, to him and to myself, that my world did not stop turning just because his had been upended. The victory at the airfield wasn't a destination, it was a departure. I was the one flying the plane now in every sense of the word. Finally, he spoke, his voice raspy and low. Anya. I looked up from my tablet, my expression neutral. I waited. I am sorry, he began, the words sounding inadequate, hollow in the quiet cabin. He scrubbed a hand over his face. That's not enough. I know it's not enough. He took a deep, shuddering breath. I saw it. Back there. I saw her face when the captain walked past her and came to you. I saw Marcus's arrogance just dissolve. And I saw you. You were... I've never seen you like that. Like what? I asked, genuinely curious. In control. Completely. You didn't yell. You didn't cry. You were just factual. It was devastating. He finally met my eyes, and I saw a deep, profound shame there. And I realized my entire role in our marriage has been to ask you not to be that person, to be smaller, to be quieter, to keep the peace. But it was never peace, was it? It was just a slow, managed surrender. My surrender on your behalf. His confession was more painful and more cathartic than any argument we'd ever had. He wasn't just apologizing for this one incident. He was acknowledging the entire rotten foundation of our dynamic. I remember that anniversary party, he continued, his voice cracking. I saw your face when Marcus gave that toast and erased you from his own success story. I felt you flinch, and I squeezed your hand and told you to let it go. What I was really saying was, please don't make me uncomfortable. Please don't make me choose a side. I've been choosing my own comfort over your dignity for years. I was a coward. I am so sorry for my cowardice. I didn't offer him absolution. I didn't say, it's okay, because it wasn't. But his self-awareness was a start. It was the first plank in a bridge back to a person I might be able to respect again. My internal monologue was no longer angry. It was analytical. I was observing him, gauging the sincerity, trying to understand if this was a true epiphany or just the regret of a man who had backed the wrong horse and watched it collapse at the finish line. When we landed in St. Bart's, the warm, humid air felt like a new atmosphere on a new planet. As we were deplaning, my phone buzzed. It was a long email from my Aunt Carol, my mother's sister. She had been on the periphery of the family drama for years. Dearest Anya, it began. Your cousin filled me in on what happened this morning. I am writing to you for one reason, to say I am sorry. Sorry for watching your sister's manipulations for years and saying nothing. We all saw it. We saw how she positioned herself as the sun around which the family must orbit, and how you were relegated to being a wealthy, convenient moon. We were all too tired, too conflict-averse, to fight her on it. We let it happen. What you did today was not just for you. It was a course correction for the whole family. I hope, in time, you can forgive our silence. With love, Carol. I read the email twice. This was a different kind of validation. It confirmed that the gaslighting wasn't all in my head. It had been a group delusion, and I had just shattered the looking glass. The final, definitive echo of the truth came later that evening. We were in our hotel suite, the sound of the ocean, a gentle rhythm outside. My phone rang. It was Helen, my financial advisor, a woman with a mind like a steel trap and zero tolerance for nonsense. Anya, I'm sorry to bother you on your trip, she said, her voice its usual brisk self. But I felt you should be aware. I received a rather colorful call this morning from a Marcus Thorne. Oh? I said, settling into a chair on the balcony. Indeed, he was in a state of high dudgeon. He was demanding access to what he kept referring to as the family holdings and the Phoenix Air accounts. He actually tried to inform me that I worked for his family. Helen paused, and I could practically hear her smiling. I took a great deal of professional satisfaction in reminding him that my fiduciary duty is to my client and my client's assets, and that in this case, the client is you, and the assets are all yours. I then informed him that, per your standing security protocols regarding unauthorized access attempts, I had immediately revoked the secondary, view-only permissions he had on the Phoenix accounts. He is, as the kids say, completely locked out. I closed my eyes, a real smile touching my lips for the first time all day. It was done. The truth had been spoken at the airport, but now it had been legally enforced. The locks had been changed. The world of consequence, the real world of lawyers and finance, had aligned with me. The victory was no longer just emotional, it was transactional, and it was absolute. The journey home was the beginning of a new reality. The air in our house, once thick with unspoken tensions, felt clearer, lighter. David moved through it with a new kind of grace. It wasn't the tentative shuffle of a man walking on eggshells, but the deliberate, mindful movement of someone who is learning to navigate a familiar landscape with a new map. He was trying not to win back my affection with grand gestures, but to earn back my respect with small, consistent acts of partnership. He didn't just make me coffee, he learned that I preferred a specific single-origin bean and made sure we never ran out. He didn't just ask about my day, he listened to my detailed explanation of a complex derivatives market, his brow furrowed in genuine concentration. He was learning to be a student in the world he had once taken for granted, and I, the professor, was deciding on his final grade. My own healing was a quiet, internal process. One afternoon, I went for a long walk along the river, a path I hadn't taken in years. I focused on the feeling of the solid ground beneath my feet, the cool breeze on my face. For so long, my primary emotional state had been a low-grade anxiety, a constant vigilance against the next slight, the next act of erasure. Now, that background noise was gone. In its place was a quiet stillness, a space I could now fill with my own thoughts, my own desires. I realized I hadn't truly known what I wanted for years. I had only known what I needed to do to keep the rickety family structure from collapsing. The most profound shift came in an unexpected form. I had been mentoring a young entrepreneur named Maya, a brilliant woman whose tech startup was struggling to secure a second round of funding. We met for coffee, and for 2 hours, I listened as she detailed her challenges with a particularly difficult venture capitalist. I didn't offer sympathy, I offered strategy. I diagrammed a negotiation framework on a napkin, taught her how to reframe her company's valuation, and gave her the direct, unfiltered advice I had so often censored for my own family's benefit. 2 weeks later, an ecstatic email from her landed in my inbox. She had secured the funding at a valuation 20% higher than her original ask. "Anya, I used the exact framework from the napkin," she wrote. "I walked in there feeling like you were in my corner, and I never backed down. I can't thank you enough for believing in me." Reading her words, I felt a spark of pure, unadulterated joy. It was a feeling more potent than any victory over my sister. This was creation, not conflict. This was my true legacy, not the passive ownership of assets, but the active empowerment of others. This was building something that would grow rather than fighting over something that was broken. That weekend, I decided to host a dinner. The guest list was my new Declaration of Independence. Maya was there, her face glowing with her recent success. Helen, my financial advisor, was there, sharing a witty, scathing story about an arrogant client. My Aunt Carol came, her presence a quiet act of solidarity. David was there, but his role was different. He wasn't the co-host, the buffer between me and the world. He was a guest in my new world, listening intently, refilling wine glasses, an active and respectful participant in a circle he hadn't built. The conversation was vibrant, intelligent, and filled with genuine laughter. There was no subtext, no hidden agendas. It was a table I had set, filled only with people who had earned their seats. During the dinner, I thought of Zara. I imagined her in her own home, the silence likely deafening the carefully constructed narrative of her life now in tatters. I felt a pang, not of anger, not even of pity, but of a kind of clinical detachment. I understood, with a final, deep clarity, that her cruelty was not about me. It was about her own gnawing emptiness. She had tried to steal my life because she was terrified she didn't have one of her own. Forgiving her, I realized, didn't mean I had to speak to her or let her back in. Forgiveness was the act of letting go of the anger because it no longer served me. It was the final, quiet closing of her account in the ledger of my mind. The story of this transformation concludes not with a confrontation, but with a moment of quiet ownership a month later. I was at the airfield again, but this time I was in the cockpit of the G650, sitting in the co-pilot seat. Captain Rostova was taking the plane up for a routine systems check and had invited me along. We were discussing a new philanthropic initiative I was launching, using Phoenix Air to transport medical teams to remote areas. As the ground crew gave the final signals, the powerful engines spooled up with a deep, resonant roar that vibrated through my entire body. The plane surged forward, the runway lights blurring into streaks of pure white light. We lifted off the ground, a seamless transition from earth to sky. Below us, the world shrank into a beautiful, orderly map. For so many years, I had tried to make myself smaller to fit into their world. I had contorted my successes, muffled my voice, and chipped away at my own worth to earn a seat at a table where I was never truly welcome. Looking out at the endless horizon, the setting sun painting the clouds in impossible shades of rose and gold, I felt the final piece of my new foundation click into place. The power, the peace, the perspective. It was all mine. A powerful, final monologue wrote itself in my mind. The culmination of a long and painful journey from erasure to existence. This seat was never offered to me, I built it. Thank you so much for watching this video. We really appreciate you spending your time with us. If you enjoyed what you saw, we've got a whole library of other videos packed with more great content just like this waiting for you on our channel. So why not dive into another one right now? And hey, if you want to make sure you don't miss out on our next upload, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. We'd love to have you join our community and see you in the next video. Thanks again.